Welcome to Off Watch, our weekly interview series. Over the last 2 months, we've been talking to some of the big names from the race's past, and it's no surprise to see these people popping up again and again in multiple campaigns as their CVs are rammed full of amazing achievements. But what if you're a first-timer? How do you break into this scene? Well, this week I spoke to British sailor Hannah Diamond, who narrowly missed out on an Olympic spot for Rio 2016 and then decided to turn her hand to offshore sailing, and she landed a place with Vestas 11th Hour Racing in the last edition. She talked me through some of the highs and lows and some of the lessons that she had to learn very fast on how to survive in the ocean race. Enjoy. If you want to learn how tough the ocean race is, you can talk to the old veterans who can recall decades of adventures, or you can talk to the first timers who made that big dive into the deep end and hear how that first lap of the planet has changed them. Hannah Diamond is a British Olympic hopeful who made the transition into ocean racer during the last edition with Vestas 11th Hour Racing. Now, that was a team that faced more unexpected challenges than most campaigns. Hannah, thank you very much for taking the time to join me. And we're going to jump into the last edition in detail in a minute. But before I do, I remember seeing an interview with you, and I think it was at the start of leg 7. And you were talking about one of the more rewarding aspects of the race is being a part of a team that you can rely on. And that being something that you took some pride in then. Looking back with obviously everything that happened during that last edition, is it that group of people, is that still something that gives you pride?
Yeah, definitely. I think something I hadn't really anticipated before the race was how important the teamwork aspect of it would be. And that's definitely kind of my biggest lasting memory of the race, is how through everything that we experienced as a team, we didn't have a choice but to pull together. And if you didn't have the right mix of people on board, then just getting through the race wouldn't be possible. So even if it was something I hadn't considered to be of top importance before the race, it's definitely something that I remember now as being one of my favourite parts of how we kind of learn each other and how we pulled together as a team.
Because I think it's important to point out that, you did come into the ocean race as maybe lacking a little bit of experience, maybe with big boats, but certainly not lacking any experience in terms of being a professional athlete. You've been somebody that had been part of the British sailing team, campaigning, trying to get an Olympic slot. And I mean, I remember, and I think it's important to sort of point out to everybody else, we know where you've been from. On the run up to 2016 in Rio, you were almost going to go to the games.
Yeah, my sailing career has been, someone asked me the other day if I would swap with anyone else, would I take a different path at any point? And I said, absolutely not. I think when you are 10 years old and you dream of going to the Olympics, you don't necessarily see all the bumps in the road that you're going to encounter. And I don't actually think I would have ended up doing the ocean race if I'd been successful in being selected for the Olympics in 2016. So I definitely wouldn't change any of the things that I've done. And I really appreciate all the things that I've learned along the way, but it has been a culmination of, now kind of 15 years. When I was very little, I knew that sailing was what I wanted to do, and I've done very little else really. So I'm really proud of what I've achieved so far. Hopefully there's more to come, but I was inexperienced at the start of the race, but I actually think I learned through the race, and I was really fortunate to have been on a team with some really, really experienced sailors. And I think it's the kind of race where whatever level anyone's at, whether it's an individual or a team at the beginning of the race, you're not going to be good enough if you haven't continued to progress at the end of the race, which I think was really interesting, and definitely something that kind of Olympic sailing had helped me with, just always looking for that next level. And I don't necessarily feel like I'm experienced now, but every day you're sailing, you learn a little bit more, which is quite a cool part of the sport, I think.
Well, let's start there then. So let's start on that transition. So you found out you're not going to go to 2016, and like you say, you were close. You were. I mean, it was basically between you and one other NACRA 17 pair. It didn't go your way. There we go. at that point when you realize, okay, this road looks like it's coming to an end, you seem to sort of make a little bit of a turn into, big boat sailing and all the rest of it. What made you think, okay, we're going to try a slightly different path?
Well, actually, it wasn't the ocean race originally that kind of took me away from dinghy sailing for a bit and into the big boat scene. I found out that we lost the trials, and actually the Olympic trial process was incredible for me as a person. I felt really honoured to have been able to go through a process where everything I'd wanted for ever since I could remember disappeared in front of me, and all I felt was very clear about the mistakes that we'd made and the lessons that we learned. I didn't feel hard done by or anything. I just was like, wow, this really pointed out some holes in our campaign. And that process was really kind of intriguing for me. I thought I'd be so devastated and disappointed, but I actually just felt like what an experience to go through, to be at such a competing at such a high level. And I was very kind of, I don't know if it's a weird word, but like awake through all of it. And I just, not many people get to experience that, where you put absolutely everything on the line. You only ever see the stories of people winning gold medals or winning Olympic selections. You never hear the stories of people that don't. And I actually found it a really amazing process to go through, even though I was obviously really kind of gutted that we didn't reach the Olympics in the end. But I just wanted a bit of a break. My plan was to take a couple of months out of the NACRA 17, do some other sailing. I knew there were so many aspects of the sport that I didn't know as much about, and I wanted to explore some of them. So I spent 2016 sailing, having fun and enjoying sailing. And I was really lucky to get on some good boats, learn from some really, really, really good people. And it was the first time in my life I didn't really have a plan of each day what I was trying to do. And it was the end of that year that they announced the rule with the crew to have 2 females on board and obviously 2 under 30s. And I remember texting my mum and saying, the rules just come out for the ocean race. Do you think it's something I should do? And she was like, no. But I just thought, if I don't give this a go now, I'll never know if it's something that I could have been good enough to do. I didn't have many contacts in the big boat arena. I was obviously inexperienced. And so I just, from that day, set out to do whatever I needed to do to get myself on a team.
It's really interesting you say that you didn't have that many contacts, because let's be honest, that's probably the biggest asset that any of us could have. Loads of people want to do the race. So, I mean, you obviously then go and do the race. You're there doing a transatlantic trial with, Mark and Charlie on board Vestas 11th Hour Racing. How did you get from, I'm going to try and chase this down, to actually being on board, holding a sheet, trimming?
To be honest, I'm sure a lot of it actually comes down to chance, because it kind of seemed way too big for me to be able to approach. I didn't even know where to start. And I was lucky. I live in Hamble, which is full of sailors, and I'd met a few of them, but I was very much from a different world. Olympic sailing, big boat sailing in the UK don't really cross paths at all. And I was always the odd one out, living here, sailing my boat with one other person, when there's, 40, 50 footers sailing with 10 to 12 people. And, no one really understood what I did. And I, to be honest, didn't really understand what they did. And so it took a long time of kind of just being happy to learn from the bottom and accept that some of the roles I was doing were kind of, I wasn't adding my experience. I was just doing whatever needed to be done on board before I was happy enough to approach someone to try and get a trial on a team. And I spoke to a few different people. And I ended up really randomly doing the Wilder St. Bart's in 2017. And Charlie Enright was just being hounded by people. He was never on his own. The poor guy was, he just announced that they were going to be going again as Vestas 11th Hour Racing. And I remember thinking, if I could just speak to Charlie, then, I'm in a lot better shape than I am now with absolutely nothing. Anyway, I was fortunate enough to have some friends who had finished Olympic sailing at 2016. Then they'd also gone on to doing some big boat stuff. And they kind of recommended me to Phil Harmer, who had just signed up to be part of Vestas 11th Hour at the time. And kind of through those conversations I wasn't really involved in, I ended up having a conversation with Charlie, and he invited me to do a transatlantic with them about 3 weeks later. So I flew to Newport, and I didn't know anyone on board. I'd never been to Newport before. I'd never sailed a 65-footer before, and we were just about to cross the Atlantic to sail back home.
So this is the bit that I find really, really fascinating, because yes, all the twists and turns of the race, but also you're in a situation now where you want to appear that you are so good. You want to pick, I know absolutely everything, but of course you don't. You can't until you've done all the miles and the miles and the miles. How did you try and conduct yourself on that boat? You know, what did you ask lots of stupid but vital questions, or did you try and go, oh no, I know exactly what I'm doing?
I thought, if I get on this boat and talk like I know what I'm talking about, they're going to think I'm stupid, because everyone who was there had done the previous race with different teams.
Right.
And I just had in my mind, like, this is not my world, this is their world, and I need to be a positive part of it, but I can't pretend that I'm an expert at this right now, because I'm not, and I can't pull it off if I pretend to be. So we actually did a couple of days kind of corporate sailing with some of the sponsors that they'd signed up early on, while the boat was in its kind of home port of Newport. And remember, day one, you know, I was saying to everyone, hi, I'm Hannah. I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't even sure if I could remember all of their names at that time. And we had a kind of morning briefing. I'd never set foot on the boat before. And he was like, okay, Hannah, you're going to be trimming today, and we have corporate guests on board. And I just remember thinking, like, okay, I need to make sure I have a good day today. So we did that for 3 or 4 days, and I don't think I had any huge errors. I had Phil kind of looking over my shoulder, which I was like, oh, if I can get him on board, kind of convince him that I know a little bit what I'm talking about, then I should be all right. And it was just, I remember just being so nervous, because it's really easy in Olympic sailing to know where you are in terms of form, because you're racing so often and you race the same people all the time. So you've got a results sheet coming out, you know, every other week, especially in the summer, where you've got kind of a judgment from yourself, but also from other people on whether you're any good or not. And in the big boat world, it's completely different, because you have to portray your skills to other people in a way that's not measured by numbers and a results card.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can be a good trimmer on a bad boat.
Yeah, and so just I just had an idea in my head of what I could bring, and I couldn't pretend that I was an expert in Volvo 65, because I wasn't, and there were so many people there who were. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm quite a positive person. I pick things up quite quickly. I'd really like to be a trimmer. So as long as I'm progressing, as well as kind of showing that I've got a base level of knowledge. I mean, these boats are enormous and powerful things. They're not, there's no joking about it. You have to, know a fair amount about big boats and winches and loads of everything before you even jump on board, even if it's just for a kind of a pro-am race or a sail. So I had done as much research as I could into that, spoken to people who did the previous race whenever I could. But it was pretty terrifying to begin with.
What was there any? I'm desperately seeking you to sort of try and validate my own inadequacies in terms of sailing, because whenever I jump on board a boat, I'm always thinking, I don't know what that bit of rope is. Like, I don't know what that button does. I forget the way that this works. And you have to ask those silly questions. Was there a moment where you thought, I'm going to have to ask this question? I know that this question is going to, in my mind at least, appear very basic. Was there something where you can remember going, okay, swallow the pride. What does this do? How do I do this?
Well, I think the good thing for me was that I didn't really have any pride. I think when you, but honestly,
it sounds bad the way you say it, but I know what you mean. When
you put so much into a campaign like I had in my Olympic sailing, John and I really thought that we were going to be competing at the Olympics in 2016. and you kind of see all of that come crashing down in front of you when you feel like you've been doing a really good job, and you're some of the top sailors in that class in the world. I think that gives you a lot of perspective, and I was kind of confident in my own ability once we got into everything, that I was quite happy to be like, look, I mean, I can't be expected to know how all these gear changes work exactly, like what gear do we jibe in. But I think the hard thing is knowing which are the stupid questions. So there are some things that you should know, and other things that once you know the things that you can't be expected to know until you've been on the boat, then it's a lot easier to kind of be like, look, I actually have no idea what this does or how we do it. And you're not racing at that point, so it's a lot better to ask it then than in the pre-start or something like that.
So you get on the boat, you're there, you've obviously impressed the right people, you've obviously sort of earned your place. Vestas 11th hour racing it didn't have the biggest lead in time to the race compared with some of the campaigns. So what was that when those days were ticking down to the start in Alicante? Did it feel like that time went quickly, or was it a case of waiting for Christmas? Come on, it can't come soon enough.
There was just so much to do in the time from when leg zero started and we did the Fastnet in August. And for me, it was quite nice because I was based at home at that point. So we had a bit of time with the whole team. I met Tony Matter the day before the start of the Fastnet. I'd never met him before. And then we went off and did that. And that was my first Fastnet as well. So yeah, and it seems crazy to come from a background of where you train for years and years and years for a week of racing that in the end might not even happen, if you're not selected, to then be training for, a couple of weeks for a race that lasts 9 months. But, that's just the game. So I think we knew we had a lot to do in the build up to the start, not just in terms of learning the boat, but also just the logistics of once you leave the base in Lisbon, which is where we were before we went to Alicante for the actual race start. You basically have to have everything you need. In terms of spares, food, clothes, everything. Once those containers leave, they are on the road for the race. And yeah, of course, it's possible to stock up with things here and there, but everything has to be ready to go so much in advance. Like the lists are just kind of endless. And the logistics behind the race blow my mind. But as sailors, you're just trying to get every minute out of the day that you can to make sure that you're in the best spot for the day one of the race start.
Well, let's talk then about the start, because leg one obviously goes pretty well. And I'm curious to know from somebody who was inside the team at that point, Mark and Charlie, they always sort of come across as, and I say this as a compliment, quite casual, very sort of down to earth, very kind of honest. What was the belief in your team before you guys started the race? Where were your aspirations in terms of performance?
Well, I think it was interesting because we had a team of incredible experienced sailors, and leg zero, I think for some people was kind of a marker of where people were at. But for us, it was just, we just need to tick off all the jobs on the boat. That was very much a build up. And I didn't know that I was doing leg one until the day before we started. So I was planning to be getting on the boat in Cape Town. And then we had an injury with one of the team. And that meant that on the Friday afternoon, it was kind of pack your bags, you're on. So I hadn't done the import race or any of that. And because we had 3 girls on our team and we were rotating. So I hadn't been on the boat for about a week, 2 weeks before the race start. And then all my expectations of how my time was going to be planned and my involvement with the team the day before the start completely changed. My parents and I were planning to have a nice weekend in Alicante, celebrate the start of the race. And then, I was going to go home for a bit and meet the team in Lisbon. But that all changed. And it was just kind of the most insane stuff. Like, start, because I just had to get ready in my head to be getting on the boat. I hadn't been on the boat sailing for 2 weeks at this point. So to prepare myself kind of mentally, as well as, you know, get all my kit ready and things like that, was quite full on. But the start was an amazing experience. The little import section before we headed off from Alicante was really full on. There's a really good clip of me not wearing a smock, taking the J1 down on the bow and just being absolutely fire hosed. And it was kind of, this is how not to start your first Volvo Ocean race, in terms of looking after yourself. But I think Tom Johnson said to me, just, we were on the way out through all the spectator boats, he was like, look up, because this will never be the same again. And the number of people that came out to watch the start was just incredible. And the environment that creates is amazing.
There was the good rumor going around that you guys had with Vestas, wind energy, that you guys had a little bit of access to computer power and navigation and some modeling for coastal racing. And it was certainly, I remember you guys making a bit of a bold call, staying north. I think Accent Bell was the only boat that stayed with you, and it paid dividends as you were sort of sailing along the Spanish coast. Did you have access to this? I mean, tell me, come on, be honest. You know, or was it just, you were just good?
We had an amazing kind of onshore navigation team, and yes, we accessed different people when we were at each of the different venues, and we had one of the guys from Vestas definitely helped us out with their modelling, and actually, like, that kind of background information is amazing, but it was definitely, you know, a decision that was made on the boat that I think set us up to win that leg. And watching Sci-Fi work is pretty incredible. He's so calm and collected and patient with his decision making, especially when the risks and the gains and the losses are so big over such big distances. So that, going back to talking about teamwork, how he had information that we'd all discussed in the build up to the leg start, but then obviously there's no contact with those people once you've left the dock. So how he was able to kind of make those decisions based on there's such an element of trust involved in the information that you've been given before the start, and then how that evolves and how you monitor the information that you're getting based on forecasting going forwards. I mean, Sci-Fi's incredible navigator. So it was pretty cool to see. I mean, it was a pretty bold decision in that first leg. And just to see him be kind of so calm and happy that was the right thing to do, just kind of sets the tone with the rest of the boat. You're like, right, well, if we're going to split a little bit here, then trimmers have got to make sure we're going, you know, setting the sails right, and drivers got to make sure they're driving fast, because, you know, this is a decision, a win or lose decision. So that's pretty cool.
What a great way to begin that edition of the race, with a win. I mean, I remember Mark and Charlie saying after their Alva Medica campaign, you know, we're back, we're going to be a contender. And suddenly everybody's thinking, yeah, absolutely, you know, you are. Was it confirmation for you guys in the team that, you know what, we are as good as we think we are? Or was it, we can do this?
I mean, there's definitely never a lack of confidence in the team that we could get a really good result. And the goal was always to win the race from day one. I don't think you should really start the race if that's not your goal. We're not on a cruise around the world in any way. It's a race, so we're there to win it. And I think definitely for the people who had done a lot of races before, it was kind of a confirmation of, yeah, we've got an amazing team here. We can do something really special. And actually, on a personal note, I kind of felt a bit like I wasn't almost worthy of winning a leg straight off, because I knew I was surrounded by this incredible team. And I think probably because I hadn't expected to do that leg, I just felt like the gap between me and them had become bigger rather than smaller, because I was on board and I was a genuine part of that team. But I thought people have put years and, you know, tens of years into winning a Volvo leg, and they're amazing sailors, and some of them hadn't done that, and I've just kind of jumped on. I've worked really, really hard to be here, but I almost felt like I hadn't been through enough in ocean racing at that point to have won a leg of the Volvo.
And I'm really interested here to learn how you and the team dealt with that that thing that sailors always know about with the equator: doldrums, heat, boredom. I mean, how hard did that hit you as a challenge?
I mean, the heat was definitely a challenge. Being from the UK, we haven't really experienced a lot like that. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in other countries, been really fortunate to travel with sailing for a long time now, but mostly you're staying in air-conditioned hotel rooms, and just there being no escape from the heat is really draining. And so it's hard to sleep. And then when you're on deck, it's hard to concentrate, and being able to keep hydrated and fueled, you completely lose your appetite when it's that hot, which is just not sustainable over the length of the leg. So you have to kind of force yourself into the habit of eating and drinking, resting when you can. If you can't sleep, then you're resting as much, getting as much rest as you can in your off watch, because as we know in ocean sailing, you don't know if your next off watch is going to happen. You could be into a series of jibes. You could just be peeling sails all the time. So there was a huge amount to learn for me. I was on watch with Phil Harmer, which was really cool because he just takes everything like that in his stride. So all I kind of had to do was look at him and be like, what's Phil doing? Just kind of copy that. And I was in pretty good shape. But yeah, it's difficult managing your expectations, I think, is the hardest thing, because it's easy when you're sailing in 25 knots, you're making really quick progress to the finish. I think we had 8 days to go for 5 days. So we weren't for 5 days. And that really kind of eats away at you a little bit.
What would have set you off in that position? Or was there anything that you would have to say to your teammates, don't do this because I am about to explode?
I don't know. I think there was one watch, I remember it was the middle of the day, and I was a bit dehydrated, I think, and there was just no escape from the heat, and I was trimming. I was just thinking, I just need to go and get some water. But we were in such an intense battle. I think we'd been racing for 9 days or something, and you could actually see the rest of the fleet around us. So it was kind of like nobody move. And I was like, I just need someone to bring me something to drink and then I'll be fine. And it was I was absolutely fine. But in that moment, all I could think of was like, if I could just wake someone up, and you think of taking someone's precious off watch minutes. And I was like, no, I can't do that. So your watch goes really slowly at that point. But also if you're completely in the hands of the doldrums and the small zephyrs of wind that are coming across with the clouds. And so you've got to take the wind kind of in any direction that it will take you. And sometimes that doesn't link you to the next bit of pressure. So it's really hard to deal with thinking longer term. You've got this bit of breeze here, but actually it's taking you 180 degrees from where you're trying to go in the attempt of trying to link up with the next cloud. So I think, it's a massive skill to be able to see a much bigger picture. And that was something that was pretty difficult for me.
And then I mean, looking back, the other challenge from the doldrums, or shortly afterwards, are you scared of lightning?
I'm actually not that scared of lightning. Maybe I should be a bit more scared of lightning. But I've been to so many events in other countries where there's a complete panic about lightning. And I've always kind of thought, I guess maybe from growing up as a kid and sailing, maybe we shouldn't have been sailing in thunderstorms and things like that. But for me, the bit about coming out of the doldrums was just the speed that things changed. Every 10 minutes you could have a different sail up, and just trying to be ahead of the game. When you've got normal, let's call it normal sailing conditions, you can plan ahead. So you know that you're going to be peeling through sails, for example. All of that just completely goes out of the window when you're coming out of the doldrums, because it's very much reacting to what you've got right now, and kind of being prepared for absolutely anything. So that was a bit of a mindset shift that we needed to have on board. And I think in that leg, we dealt with that really, really well and came out of the doldrums pretty well.
Let's talk then about that next leg, as you say, leg 7. I mean, this is the iconic leg. This is the one. Rounding of Cape Horn, Southern Ocean, and everything that's going to go along with there. How on earth do you even pack for that leg as somebody that hasn't been down there before? Because we talked earlier about asking stupid questions. I mean, I've got a stupid question. How many socks do you take? I mean, what on earth do you do?
So it was quite funny when in the first leg, we were coming through Gibraltar and it was 25 knots. And we'd been in Lisbon and Alicante for a couple of months, so really acclimatized to that kind of weather. And suddenly got a lot colder and I was absolutely freezing. And I remember Tony looking at me and saying, if you're cold here, then you're going to be absolutely freezing in the Southern Ocean. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't have a lot of space. We had these bags, I think we kind of allowed ourselves about 6 kilos of clothes to last the duration of the leg. And I was a bit worried about being cold because there's just no escape and it becomes a really long leg if you're cold for that amount of time. You can't sleep properly. It's just miserable. So I think setting off to a leg like that, you have to be really aware that you have to look after your kit because if it gets wet, it's not going to dry. There's condensation inside the boat, so it drips on you, icy cold water when you're sleeping. I obviously didn't know any of this at the time because I hadn't been in the Southern Ocean before. And actually, in the pavilion that all the sailors gather in before the sailors' parade, before we leave the dock for the start, Sophie Cizek from Matt Frey said to me, she just kind of came up to me and we were chatting, and there's this amazing atmosphere of genuine nerves from everyone, whether you're a first timer or you're 5th, 6th, 7th timer. I think Auckland is kind of a leg that brings an element of nerves to everyone. And Sophie said to me, she was like, oh, well, you're lucky because you don't know what's about to happen. And at that point, I was kind of like, and now I completely understand what she means. When you set off for the first time, it's all new and you don't know how cold, how windy, how extreme the weather can be, and how kind of long it feels that you're putting yourself through some pretty intense conditions. And now I completely get it, but I don't know if I would then go and say that to someone who is about to do that leg for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't really know what to make about that, but it's obviously now, you know how tough it can be, but it was an incredible leg in terms of racing. Obviously, it was an incredible leg in terms of the history of the race and John Fisher and everything. The bit that I want to ask you about was obviously you round Cape Horn. And again, you guys are doing really well in this leg. I think you rounded Cape Horn in 2nd. I think you were then, before we get to what happened, when you rounded Cape Horn, did you think we're out of it? It's easier from here.
You're never comfortable, definitely on that leg. And I think it was about 8 days in, I was kind of thinking, this is tough, and we're still a long, long, long way from anywhere. So for me, seeing Cape Horn was a massive relief, especially after everything that had happened. It was a massive relief just to be near land, even if it wasn't somewhere we could just kind of pull in. So it was pretty strange after that, everything that unfolded. And, the experience of the people before were right. Once you get to Cape Horn, it's definitely not over.
Well, so let's jump to that moment then. You guys are sailing along, like I say, 3rd place, I think, very close 3rd, this is all pretty good. Where are you and what happens?
So we had a pretty frustrating couple of hours. We had a problem with getting the second reef lock on. So Dongfeng just stormed past us while we were trying to sort it out. So we went from 2nd to 3rd. We were sailing along, pretty windy, and nothing kind of untoward going on, just normal sailing, not particularly nice sailing conditions, just being really fire hosed with water. But then all of a sudden this huge bang, top of the rig hits the water, boat goes flat. There's 4 of us on deck, 5 people down below. Suddenly everyone's on deck and we're trying to figure out exactly what's happened. I just remember Charlie's face when he came up. He'd been off watch. I think he actually was awake at the time, kind of looking at the computer, and obviously everyone on board instantly knows what's happened, and just the disappointment in his face, knowing that having not finished leg 4, taking us out of leg 5, and then leg 6, and then leg 7 not being able to finish, that was kind of the results part of the race was over at that point. And you know, him and Mark had put that campaign together from the beginning, and I'll never forget his face when he came up on deck, just realizing that was over, and it was all kind of, right, let's salvage what we can from this and head to safety, because by no means are we in a safe place right here. So it was all hands on deck to make sure that the boat was safe, save anything we could. And fortunately, we're only 100 miles from the Falkland Islands, which was, to me, just the biggest relief. We hadn't been close to land for so long, and it was awful that the rig had broken and everything that went along with that. But just knowing that we were not too far from land was kind of the only good thing that had happened to the team in quite a long time. And we headed there to see what we could do.
I can imagine, as you say, you know, that first fear. Oh, I mean, a spreader or the end of the mast going through the hull is pretty a realistic, you know, sort of possibility. But you know, you get everything under control. You know, you're going to be okay. The Falkland Islands, like you say, they're not too far away. There's not a lot at the Falkland Islands. And then even when you've got to the Falkland Islands, there's a long way to go to get to Itajai or the next port of call. And then you sort of embark on this amazing journey. Before I ask you about what you guys did to sort of jury rig the boat, after you do a leg like the Southern Ocean, I can imagine you're thinking, I am going to pull in. I am going to have a beautiful meal. I'm going to have a soft bed. I'm going to have whatever. Here you guys are arriving in Port Stanley with nothing. I mean, did you even know where you were going to be staying? Did you have anything? Was it just your 6 kilo kit bag and that was it?
That was literally it. And so I obviously spent a lot of time in Brazil. So I was really looking forward to arriving there, and know they'd put on a great party and a couple of caipirinhas. So that was kind of every day in the Southern Ocean. I was thinking, well, at least it'll be 25 degrees. We can go to a beach, have a caipirinha on the beach, and everything will be great. So that was pretty sad that we weren't going to end up there. But it was pretty surreal, to be honest. So we motored through the night, just trying to keep the boat as together as we could. It's amazing how much stiffness the rig puts into the boat. So we had to be really careful, motoring upwind, making sure that we didn't do any more damage than we already had with losing the rig. And we arrive on a Saturday morning, kind of 7:30 in the morning, I think it was. So like beautiful sunny day, pretty cold and windy. And we're all pretty used to Saturday mornings in any kind of town. You know, coffee, breakfast is available kind of everywhere. Mm-hmm. And this guy who had been arranged by, I think, Rick Tomlinson had helped. He'd spent some time down there and knew some people. So we were met at the dock. There's not a lot of places you can moor a race boat in the Falkland Islands. And we kind of tied it up and went to make a plan. And we thought, well, fresh food, we haven't had that for a while, let's have breakfast. And they kind of said, Saturday, not a thing that happens here. So we went into this tiny little B&B, and they had the heating on, and all of us had kind of blisters on our faces from being out in the cold. And that, for me, the change in temperature, being warm and inside, I'd been wearing the same thermals, I think, probably since day 2, so almost 2 weeks later. And we're all sat in this room just kind of digesting everything that's happened the previous 24 hours. Just kind of not believing that we're really there. I guess on one hand, you're really happy that you're safe, you're on dry land, but you're still, you know, ultimately the race as a team for us is going to be very difficult to get a good result in. Now we're going to have to work even harder to get get a result that we're really proud of in the race. So yeah, I think it's just such a mix of emotions at that point, and a pretty strange place to be, but amazing to have been there. Not somewhere that was on my bucket list of places to go.
Very much a left turn, very much a unexpected adventure, and certainly something I think as a team, I'm sure you guys all look back on with a lot of pride, because what you do next is, I think, quite remarkable. You try and leave, you get a mechanical issue with the engine, the boat comes back, and you realise time's ticking away here. We've got to make this journey to Itajai. We've got to do it. You're converting ballast tanks to fuel tanks, all this sort of stuff. Did you find a random lamppost? Did you go, let's go and find a lamppost? How on earth did the lamppost come about?
Well, so I personally can't take a lot of credit for that, because so Nick Dana, who was our boat captain and bowman, has an amazing engineering brain, and we were met by a guy who really looked after us. He did a lot of repairs to boats that came in with Southern Ocean damage, so that was kind of his thing, and he had a shed full of kind of bits of old boats and everything. And so it was actually, I think it was one time a lamppost, but it had also been used as a fishing mast.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it wasn't from the street that we took it and put it on. But it took quite a lot of welding. It had a sheave on it to hoist the sail that we had. Then we had a couple of sail makers. So Stacey and Tom and Tony got involved in recutting some sails to make a jib so the boat could kind of, I think the plan was for it to go upwind, but I'm not sure it ever did really go upwind. But it was a real kind of, everyone kind of brought the skills that they had outside of just sailing to make the best of a bad situation, try and do whatever we could to get the boat to Brazil as fast as possible. So it was definite, and again, not just the sailing team were involved in that. We had a lot of people involved either with the race in Brazil or who had contacts in the Falkland Islands who were helping us out. So as far as that goes, we couldn't have been any luckier with the people that we had involved at that point.
And you do get the boat to Itajai, gets delivered to Itajai. I think the old Alvi Medica rig, I think that was the mast that sort of went back in it. The boat's kind of, carry on going again. Is it things like this that, as a first timer, I mean, you were sort of hinting at it before, you don't realise that actually the race isn't necessarily between the start gun and the finish line. It's these little moments as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you obviously set out to finish every leg, and it would have been amazing to have seen the potential that we had with the team results-wise had things gone differently. But that is just part of the race. You can't guarantee anything. So I think that was something that it took until this point for me to realise that it's kind of a privilege to even make the finish line, let alone get a good result. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier about not really feeling worthy of winning that first leg, because we hadn't had any of these experiences that by this point in the race I've now got. And so you kind of appreciate the result so much more when you've been through everything that the race brings, with the sailing, but also with everything else that happens.
You said at the beginning of this that you got some advice telling you not to do the race. You've done it now, and I'm sure it tested you. Do you want to go back and do that test again and see what happens next time?
Yes and no. I think I've been incredibly lucky to have had the experience of doing the race, but it takes everything from you. If you can't put in 100% to it, then again, there's no place for you on board. And I think it would be really easy to sit and say, yes, I'd love to do all the great bits again, but hard bits, I don't know. So yeah, with the right team, with everything kind of perfectly, then yeah, it's an incredible race to be part of, but I don't know, like right now, if I have that 100% in me, and I wouldn't want to be part of a team knowing that I wasn't putting in that 100%. So I think out of respect for the race and everything that it entails, I think it's easy to sit at home with a cup of tea and think like, oh, wasn't that bad? And then you actually think back and think, yeah, I mean, you're away from home for a long time. You're away from your family. You put your family through a lot when you do the race as well. I know my mum would be pretty happy if I never went offshore ever again. Because it's hard for the people who are onshore as well, because they're worried about you, and they're supportive in the way that you're doing what you want to do. But I think it would be bad of me to not respect the race in the way that it needs to be respected, because it's a massive challenge and there are dangers involved, but an incredible thing to have done. And I couldn't have been more proud of being part of the team that I was part of.
It's interesting. You can hear it in your voice, how much that race has got under your skin, and I'm sure changed you for the better, and given you that mental toughness that you sort of talked about earlier. Thank you very much for talking us through a lot of that, highs and lows, and a lot of tough moments and a lot of proud moments as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And my thanks to Hannah Diamond for a very honest account of what it takes to be a competitor in this race. You can leave us a suggestion in the comments below as to who you want us to talk to next. And if you want more interviews like this, you can subscribe for more. We've got plenty more coming up in the next few weeks. See you next time.